Her only son, Amir, was 19 years old, and he was wounded in his eyes. He couldn't see. And I ended up spending a lot of time with Rina. And I remember one time being with Rina in her room, and the Israeli National Band came to play songs to lift the spirits of the Israeli soldiers. They used to come every day and play songs like Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold, and the Tikva. And I remember being with her in the room one day, and they stood around Amir's bed, and they started playing their songs. And Rina started crying. And I started walking backward out of the room because I did not want Rina to feel uncomfortable. And without skipping a beat, she pulls me back by my hand, pulls me back into the room. And she said, "Don't worry, it's not your fault. It's not your fault." And we just both stood there crying. What a difference between her, a Jewish mother, looking at her only son, deformed at age 19 years old, and still able to love me, supposedly her enemy, the Arab. What a difference between her and a Muslim woman who straps bombs on her son's body and sends him out to kill a few Christians and Jews. That difference, the difference between the Arabic world and Israel is the difference between barbarism and civilization. It's the difference between dictatorship and democracy. It's the difference between evil and goodness. I was with my mother in the room, and one of the ladies, like I mentioned to you earlier, was a Muslim, the two ladies that were around my mother. One, she was in the hospital for 10 days. And after 10 days, the Israelis saved her life. She was completely paralyzed, and they saved her life. They picked her from the street, laying flat. She couldn't get up and run away to hide. She was paralyzed because of her injury. They brought her and took care of her. And after 10 days, when they would do their morning rounds, and after they would leave, she would look at them and she would say, "I hate you all. I wish you were all dead." And for the first time in my life, at age 17 years old, I saw evil. Evil. Because when you are unable to be grateful to those who saved your life, you have no soul. You have no conscience. And once you lose your soul and your conscience, you have crossed a very fine line between humanity and something very ugly on the other side. That was my experience with Israel. After staying there for 22 days and not wanting to go back to Lebanon, but I had to because of my parents. I had to because I'm an only child. You see, my parents were married for over 22 years of their lives. They couldn't have any children. And my mother had me, she was 55 years old, and my father was 60. I was a miracle in their lives. So by the time I was a teenager, my parents were elderly and they needed my help. I had to go back to Lebanon to take care of them. But I vowed that one day I will return to Israel. That one day I would live amongst those people whose values and character I respected so much, whose culture I admired. And I was so blessed to be able to move to Israel in 1984 and become news anchor for World News in the Middle East, covering news events. I was thrown in the heart of the media in Jerusalem. Literally, was unbelievable. I worked in a building called Binyanei Ha'umah, the nation's building in Jerusalem, right next to the Hilton Hotel, if any of you have ever visited Jerusalem. And all the Western media was located in the same building. ABC, NBC, France TV, German TV, Italian TV, everybody. And I was able to see information and evaluate information and had access to information where I was able to evaluate it for myself. Information that was not filtered through the Arabic propaganda filters that Arabs were oblivious to. Because as you know, in the Middle East, with the exception of the State of Israel, all the press, all the media is controlled by the governments. The people do not get the news that they should get. They get the talking points of whatever dictator ruling them at the time. We also, that perfect example with Yasser Arafat with the Palestinian Authority. In the middle of the suicide bombing in the mid-90s, you go to Israel, you ask somebody, what do you think about Ariel Sharon? You get 20 different answers from 20 different people on the street. You go to the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian territories, and you ask them, what do you think of Yasser Arafat? You get the same answer from 20 people. Otherwise, you'd be dead. So I was able to evaluate the news and report on the news in the 80s, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89. And I started seeing a pattern developing as I was reporting on the news. And I started realizing that the name of the perpetrators of terrorism, no matter what country it happened in, were all Muslims. The names were Ahmed, Muhammad, Ali, Hussein, Hamid, you name it, they were all Muslims. The names of the victims were always Westerners, Christians and Jews. Terry Wade, Terry Anderson, Colonel Higgins, the Achille Lauro, the TWA, the Pan Am flights. And I started realizing that what I used to think was a regional problem in the Middle East between the majority Muslims trying to control, kill, or kick out the minority Jews and Christians have become the worldwide problem. But the world was asleep. No one was paying attention. No one was paying attention. If it wasn't for 911 in the United States, the world would still be asleep. Because as long as Jewish blood was being shed on the streets of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and as long as Christian blood was being shed on the streets of Beirut, nobody in Europe nor in the United States gave a darn. It didn't affect them. You know, we, especially as a Christian country in the Middle East, Lebanon, we used to wait and think, I remember my parents telling me, Mother France is going to come save us. Mother America is going to come save us, the largest Christian country in the world. Mother Britain is going to come save us. The Vatican is going to do something. The Christians were asleep. While the Christians were asleep, the Jews came and shed their blood to save the Christians in Lebanon. And here we are today, after September 11th. September 11th, I had hoped was a wake-up call for America. But sadly, we pushed the snooze button and we're back snoozing again. And that's a sad reality. In my book, Because They Hate, I discussed how terrorist organizations have infiltrated the United States, how terrorists have set up shop in the United States. And I used an example, Hamas. And I use Hamas in particular because when people think of Hamas, they don't think America. Hamas is Israel's problem. Who gives a darn what happens over there? Gaza is so far. You know, it's a 13-hour flight. Who cares? It doesn't affect me. This is what people here think. It's an 8,000 miles away problem. Hamas, of all the terrorist organizations in the United States that have set up shop in America, and the top three are Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, and Hamas, Hamas has the largest infrastructure on American soil. Hamas has cells in over 40 states in the United States. Over 40 states. Hezbollah has 11 cells in the United States. People don't realize that. Hamas has cells from New York to California and everywhere in between, including LA, San Diego, Santa Barbara, San Francisco, and I'm only giving you California because I know this affects you. Orange County, Anaheim, there's a major cell in Anaheim. There's a major cell of Al-Qaeda in Anaheim. There's a large concentration of Arabs and Muslims, well, Muslims because Christians are not blowing themselves up with anybody, but there's a large Islamic concentration in